Newsfirst, face to face with Chamara Nanayakkarawasam.
A very good evening and welcome to this evening's edition of Face to Face, coming to you from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. Today is the 3rd of April 2024. I am Chamara Nanayakkarawasam for the Newsfirst team, and tonight my guest on the show is Attorney at Law Chamara Nanayakkarawasam. A very good evening to you, Chamara, and welcome to the show. I believe it's your first appearance on Face to Face.
Thank you. First time.
Certainly. So, Chamara, as we were having a small discussion prior to the program, we were talking about the issues that are plaguing the country at present. If you keep aside the socio-economic woes of the people and take a look at the more judicial and structural governance-related matters, we can see that the matter concerning a constitutional overhaul has been brought up every now and then, especially when election season rolls over. Whichever party that is in power keeps pushing the sentiment that a constitutional overhaul is required, or the executive presidency should be abolished, and so on. So before we move on to the executive presidency matter, I want to ask you about the constitutional side of things, because many people have called for a fresh constitution to be introduced, and we saw several instances where successive presidents attempted to do so. However, there has been nothing fruitful that have come out of it.
Yes.
So in your professional opinion, Chamara, do you believe Sri Lanka requires a brand new, fresh, robust constitution, or should we keep moving forward with making amendments to the current constitution of 1978?
Of course, thank you for that question. That I, of course, honestly believe that the problem in our constitution is that from 1972 onwards, our constitution lacks that consensus. For an example, whether all the segments of the society, do they accept this constitution as their constitution? So it has been the continuous problem that we are having. From 1972 onwards, now 1972, we declared it as a unitary state.
Yes.
So whether 1978 constitution continued with that notion, it's popular, it's good for the Sinhala nationalists, but the problem is whether the minorities are happy. So the problem in the constitution, it remains. So basically through a dialogue, consultative process. So we need to adopt a new constitution. But the problem is that whether constitutional amendments as a strategic thing, politically strategist thing. For an example, when you want to hold on to power, when you want to come into power, so constitutional amendment should not play that role. So it has to be a genuine thing that with the participation of all the segments of the society.
Right.
So constitution. So if we want to have a new beginning as a Sri Lankan nation, of course we need a constitution. We need to look at our past. So we need to think afresh. So we need to have a constitution, a new constitution. But it has to be a very genuine approach by all the stakeholders, politicians, civil society. It has to be a genuine effort.
So talking about a more niche in the constitution, which is the presidential election, it's mandated in the constitution what time frame is required for the presidential election to be held. However, although the government has now announced that the presidential election will be held on time later this year, as when consulting or when looking at the track record of Sri Lankan elections, we can see that at times, if an incumbent government feels that it does not have the popular vote, it conveniently postpones a certain election. We have seen that happening with the local government elections, the provincial council elections, and so on. So, although it is mandated and mentioned in the constitution, is there any sort of loophole where the presidential election slated to be held this year could even be postponed at the 11th hour by the government?
It's very unfortunate to answer a question of this nature, because now the constitution, however, even the perfect text, if we have the perfect text, the operation of the constitution would depend on the persons who are holding these key positions.
Right.
For an example, now constitution can't determine everything. So constitution, if we have the men in power, if they want to manipulate, there will be room for manipulation.
Right.
So even in every constitution,
even
there will be
robust text.
So even if we apply the constitution in Switzerland, here Sri Lanka, so people here in Sri Lanka are men in power, so they will find loopholes to manipulate it.
Right.
So it is not a problem of the constitution, that it's a problem of the political culture.
Those who are executing the functions of the constitution.
For an example, now in Britain, they don't have a written constitution.
Okay.
But the political conventions are very strong. So the leaders can't manipulate and can't bypass
distort that social contract.
Yes, social contract. So if you distort that, so that would be end of your political career.
Right.
So even if your political party. Here, of course, very unfortunate. Now we are talking about whether the constitution says that there has to be the presidential election. So the plain text of the constitution is very clear. So you have to have the election.
Yes.
So now we have to. It's very unfortunate. Now we are discussing whether there will be certain manipulations, whether there will be a postponement of election. So now the problem is that it's not in the constitution. It's deep rooted in the society, in the culture, political culture. So the problem is that if you are manipulating the constitution, so if your followers, if the citizens, if whoever who is looking at you is calling you as clever, so you become popular by manipulating the constitution. That's the problem. So if you can win elections by manipulating the constitution, for an example, now it is said that every executive president is blamed for violating the constitution. Every executive president in this country is of course blamed for manipulating the constitution.
So how has this disingenuity come forward that has allowed people in positions of power to manipulate this constitution or the constitutional articles, Chamara? Is it on the part of the people that we haven't been keeping a close eye on whether the people that we elect and the representatives who are governing this nation are following the book, the rule to the letter, or is it something that has happened over time?
So I honestly believe now this is the price that we will have to face in this evolutionary process of the society. But this political society, so it's in an evolutionary process. So this is the price we are paying. So those who were in power, that's the price now we have been paying.
Yes.
So now we as a society, the programs like this, the awareness of the people, so the active participation of the people in the political process, that would of course make it difficult for the men in power to manipulate this. So the problem here is of course it's the political culture. So it's not something emanating from the constitution. Even the perfect sort of a constitution, so if you have people who want to manipulate it and who want to hold on to power, then of course the constitution would fail.
So do you believe the executive presidency introduced in 1978 also played a major part in eroding this trust we have in the constitution?
Of course. Now what happened with the executive presidency was that it led to the concentration of power onto one person. So ultimately the governance becomes the wish and whims of the one particular individual.
Right.
So that is what has happened now. This particular individual, for an example, the executive president, if he can manipulate to have that majority in parliament, basically he can run the entire system. So this is what has happened. So it has basically, what the executive president did was gradual erosion of the entire value system.
Okay.
So now we are facing the problem. Now we have for about now 30-40 years we have lived with the executive presidency. Then we are feeling that, so without the executive presidency, will the government be weak?
Okay.
So now that question is also being posed.
Okay.
So without the executive presidency, the government will be weak. There will be a weak executive. So that happened because now we have got used to having that one individual person saying
calling
that my word, my word is the law. So my direction that you will have to do. So the entire public sector will have to act on my advice.
Okay.
So that's the problem. Now we have got used to, for an example, that we have got used to living under emergency laws. We have got used to living under the prevention of terrorism laws. So because we feel that that's the the ordinary usual thing.
Yes.
So, whereas that should be the exception. So now we have been living under this exceptional circumstance situation.
For so long, we believe it's the norm.
Is the norm. So now that's become so generalized in the society. So now what the executive presidency has done is the political now executive with the executive presidency, internal democracy of the political parties, that ruined it.
Yes.
So you don't see political personalities who would aspire to become the leader of the country. So what you see is subservient political personalities who are subservient to the leader. So you can't see politicians who would stick to certain principles. So that is why you can't see politicians coming out of their political parties or positions because of policies.
So they are made to blindly follow the directions of the executive purely to secure their place within a political party or parliament or wherever that they are executing their duties at.
Yes. So I say executive presidency played a major part in this. So now the problem would lie, now there's an insecurity in the minds of the people.
Yes.
So can we do away with the executive presidency?
And continue to move forward.
So they feel now we will have a weak sort of a executive.
Okay.
And
so if we take a look at this in a more expansive view, what sort of a governance structure does Sri Lanka actually require? Do we remain with the executive presidency and reduce the powers that has been centralized with the president with more checks and balances on the executive? Do we empower parliament, abolish executive presidency and have a prime minister who governs the legislature? Or what sort of a governance structure does Sri Lanka require at this moment, Chamara?
Of course, now with 1978, so now can we undo what has happened in 1970? So whether we should go for a compromise, and if there is a compromise, the problem then of the issue that we'll have to address is how we will protect this the mechanism from being manipulated.
Right.
So there would of course now it is an argument purpose now whether we can go back to pre-1978 era. It's a problem.
Right.
Now, so we'll have to accept. There has to be a compromise of these systems.
Okay.
So the constitution, of course, will have to provide for a solution, and of course, outside the constitution, there has to be a strong
voice.
Yes, voice, which would assist that cause.
Right. So you believe executive presidency should remain in the country?
Now, I would say that now the a transition from this executive presidency.
Right.
So there would be a problem if overnight you are going to have a transition. I feel that there would be certain sort of a
there will be creases.
Yes. So that's the problem. So how you get rid of this? Yes, the executive president is bad. How you are trying to get rid of it? So that is, of course, there has to be a certain constitutional mechanism to come out of this. Whether I feel that you can't overnight do this.
So yes, we cannot do anything overnight, but in the long term, do you believe that Sri Lanka must abolish executive presidency and go to a parliamentary style that is led by an executive prime minister or even a prime minister?
Of course, I believe now we have to do away with the executive presidency. And also we'll have to cater within the central legislature. So we'll have to cater for the devolution as well. Now, for an example, now we'll have to have a second tier. And of course, we'll have to genuinely address that devolution issue. And for an example, we can have a bicameral sort of a legislature. And there, where the participation of the peripheral, the regional states, the provincial councils or whatever the devolution structure we have. So that sort of a more active sort of a legislature can provide a solution to this situation. That is my opinion.
Right. So you're of the opinion that local or provincial councils should be empowered further with more powers, and that should decentralize the government system.
Yes, a devolution process. Now then you'll have to assist this devolution process.
Should that include police powers as well?
Of course, now the police powers, now it's sort of an administrative power that there's nothing to worry. For an example, if you can have that check and balances, for an example, if the devolution works in its full force, for an example, even the 13th Amendment, there would be a lot of clashes between the central government and the provincial governments. So then whether you have a mechanism to sort out these disputes. For an example, a constitutional court would assist.
Right, a constitutional court which is above the Supreme Court.
Yes, the Supreme Court will hear the appellate matters. A constitutional court with constitutional questions.
Right.
So for an example, if the provincial council system works it's in full force and the democracy prevails there. So now for an example, the coordination and the coordination between the central government and the provincial government
is very poor.
According to the present constitution is the president.
Yes.
So basically the president now with the governor's involvement, president is basically manipulating this.
Yes.
So this is what we have seen here.
Yes.
So now we can of course get rid of this situation if we have a dispute resolution mechanism, for an example, by a constitutional court, the provincial governments and the central government, whatever the dispute. So that's I believe now we can't do away with devolution. And for an example, that is where the people will have to have a dialogue. We can't forget now, say, the Sinhala nationalism, Tamil nationalism. Those roots are there.
Yes.
So they play a vital role here in this whatever the political decisions that the society takes.
Yes.
So now that's the dialogue that we'll have to have. So, for an example, if the devolution, still there's opposition. Still, for an example, Sinhala nationalists, they oppose. So that is where this society will have to have a dialogue, because now that is what whatever the government or a coalition that hopes to come into power, they have to directly address this issue. For an example, now we see even sort of new political forces. So they conveniently forget this issue. So you can't conveniently forget this issue, because now if you come into power, these are the real questions that we will have to deal with.
That directly links to the national issue as well.
So if you, for an example, if you want to, you feel that it's not favorable now to speak about these issues, that's a problem. Even alternative political process, whatever the coalitions or whatever the political parties. So if you are trying to do away with these issues and you are trying to leave those issues aside and to discuss about certain popular topics, that won't do, because now when you come into power, so you'll have to deal with these real issues. So the society can't move forward without resolving these issues.
Right. So one might say, now, if there is a certain political party willing to address the key issues that need to be addressed, instead of promising subsidies or tax cuts or free givings for basically handouts, doling out handouts for the general public to relieve the burden that they are facing right now, that might make a certain political party unpopular among the general public. If they say we are going to address the national issue, we are going to address the constitutional issue, instead of saying to the people, because I feel like even the people are sometimes responsible, because we have gotten used to the welfare state mentality, and when election season comes around, the people are always waiting for the news of either a subsidy or a tax cut or something that's given to them for free. So do you believe the people must also change their mindset, where Sri Lanka needs to address their key issues first?
Yes. Now we can't blame the politicians, because if the politicians come out with certain policies and you declare in your manifesto that this is what you are going to do, of course you won't win the election. So if you keep it uncertain, then you can get the votes of all the segments of the society. So that's the problem we are having. So whoever who wins, whoever who have won the elections, see the political, whatever the
promises,
promises. So they basically cater for all. So you are not certain about your policies. So if you go with a certainty and place your policies before the people, then of course people won't vote. So that's the curse that we are having. So that's why I always say that it's not only the constitution or the law or the politicians. So no, it's the responsibility also lies with us. So if there's an erosion, if there's a problem in the society, we as the general public, we are also responsible.
So how do you think a certain political party goes about doing this? Do they bring all stakeholders to a round table and tell them these are the issues that we are truly plagued with, the structural issues, present them and then discuss ways of resolving them? How do you think they should go about it? Or just ask for the people's vote to thereafter, if they do come to power, to address these matters? What sort of a route should they take?
Now, of course, now if you are hoping to come into power, of course, then you'll have to have your own idea about these problems.
Matters, yes.
So that's why a political party, it's a democratic sort of a organization.
Yes.
So then within your organization, you'll have to have a dialogue. And you'll have to have your own opinion with the position that you take.
Yes.
So you have to confirm that and you have to place it before the people. So then within that public spectrum now sphere, you can have compromises, you can deviate from your policies, but so you have to have a certain stance on these issues. So if you don't have a stance on these issues, that's the problem.
Right.
Because now the political parties are reluctant to have a firm stand on certain issues, because they will think that they feel that because that would be not favorable for you at the election. So because that is why I say it's the problem is with the people.
So how much more active can the people be in calling out their representatives to address these structural problems or structural issues, rather than making fake promises of handouts and free, I don't know, there's so many promises that are being made, giving out essential items, we see handing out certain construction material, we see that coming into election season. But these structural issues, how do the people forget the fluff and essentially call for a substantial and a conversation which has substance to take Sri Lanka into a path of prosperity through getting our foundations right? How do the people call their representatives out to do that?
The first thing is that the political awareness of the people. So if you are more aware, if there's a dialogue between the people, within the people, and the people, the first thing that you can say, whichever the party you are voting, so for an example, the candidates you choose. So you can go for better candidates from whichever the party. So that is why I say always this is a gradual process. So it will take time. So it's a gradual evolutionary process. So the time will be short if you are more active. So it will be very lengthy if you are very lethargic.
Yes.
So now the problem now when you are voting, so each individual vote. So whichever the party you are going to vote. So you can select, pick and choose the candidate. So who would do a better job? So that is how this political culture you can improve.
You have to have a comparison within yourself to decide which representative has the better ideologies or the better methods to uplift our lives in the long run.
Yes. I always feel that the composition in parliament, if we are blaming the parliamentarians, the quality of our parliamentarians. So I feel that it's a reflection, the 225 members, it's a reflection of our society. So if you can categorize these parliamentarians or the politicians into certain categories, so I feel that this is a reflection, it's a microcosm of this,
of the larger society.
The larger society that is there, we see as the politicians, our leaders.
Right. So very quickly, although we are pressed for time, very quickly let me ask you about laws in Sri Lanka. Over the past few months, we have seen some controversial laws that have been coming forward that civil society have been very critical of, opposition lawmakers have been very critical of. Nevertheless, they have eventually been passed in Parliament. You know, I'm talking about the Online Safety Bill, the Broadcast Regulatory Act, the bill that still has not been passed, but these are the Prevention of Terrorism Bill. There are so many regressive laws that seem to be coming out of Parliament that are eventually going to erode democracy and also reduce the space of the people to voice their dissent or to be vocal on something that they are against. So very quickly, Chamara, tell me, do we need a post-judicial review system in Sri Lanka?
Of course.
And how much of an important role will that play in ensuring that the laws that are brought in to govern the people are effective laws that do not restrict the freedoms and the rights of the people?
Of course, Of course, surely now we'll have to have judicial review on post-enactment judicial review, because the true effect of a legislation can only be seen when it is in force.
Right.
So now what we have is the pre-enactment judicial review. So at the pre-enactment judicial review, what the Supreme Court, we can go to the Supreme Court and challenge. So what the Supreme Court would see in a hypothetical situation, so you will assume what would be the effect of this particular legislation, how would it affect the Constitution. So but actually now these laws, they don't operate in isolation. So these laws are related to the broader, the network of laws and the Constitution.
Yes.
So that is how we can see when it is only actually in operation, we can see the true effect of the law. So that is why post-enactment judicial, even in 50 years or 100 years, if the law is unconstitutional, then the superior court, the highest court of the country, whether it's the Supreme Court or whether it's a new constitutional court, should be able to declare that this is unconstitutional.
Right. Okay. So, unfortunately, that is all the time we have on tonight's edition of Face to Face. Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Chamara Nanayakkarawasam, for joining me and sharing your insights with me and as well as our viewers. Thank you to all our viewers for joining Face to Face this evening. Take care and have yourselves a great Wednesday night.